Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the University of New England. My name is James Herbert, and since 2017, I've had the pleasure of serving as the president of UNE. And so I'm so happy to see so many people tonight. And oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see so many community members here with us tonight, gathered for this very special event. And I know we have even more people joining in online. So welcome to everyone online as well. And before we get started tonight with the debate, I'd like to give a big shout out, a thanks to our co-sponsor for the debate, the Portland Press Herald. So a hand for the Press Herald. I also would like to thank the journalists who are serving on the panel tonight. Thank you for your work. It's crucial to the functioning of a healthy civic society. So thank you for joining us. And most importantly, I offer my sincere appreciation to the 5 mayoral candidates joining us. Thank each of you very much for your commitment to the city of Portland. And the city is our home too, and we're proud of the contributions that our students, our faculty, and our professional staff make to Portland, the communities, and the people. Our impact in Portland is felt most acutely throughout the city's many fine medical institutions. And I'm happy to report that we will soon be moving our College of Medicine, Maine's only medical school, from our Biddeford campus right here to a new home in the Portland campus, just adjacent to this building. So this is a very exciting opportunity. It's going to allow us to train more healthcare professionals, including more doctors, for Maine and the region to stay right here in the state, so we're very excited about that. Stay tuned for more information for the opportunities that this will create for the state and for Portland in particular. We're so happy that UNE is able to host you tonight. One of the highest roles, in fact, I would go so far as to say it's a sacred role of institutions of higher education, is to offer a robust marketplace of ideas. And events like this one help us to do just that. Indeed, one of my top priorities at UNE involves encouraging our community members to engage with diverse viewpoints through practicing civil discourse. We encourage a healthy skepticism in the young people entrusted to our care, challenging them to question their own beliefs and those of others. Platforms like our Center for Global Humanities lecture series and our President's Forum, the former on this campus, the latter on our Biddeford campus, help ensure that students develop the habits of mind to resist the fixed ideologies that have paralyzed our politics in recent years and have limited our progress in addressing the many challenges facing our world. I expect tonight's debate will provide our students, and indeed the rest of our community, with another example of just how important discourse is to the functioning of a healthy society. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Portland Press Herald Executive Editor Steve Greenlee, who will introduce the moderators and tonight's candidates. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Herbert. Thank you to our candidates for Portland Mayor, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. It's become a cliche in the news business to say that this is a really important election, because which one isn't? But it feels like we're at an inflection point in Portland. The city is facing a host of important issues right now: homelessness, affordable housing, rent control, an influx of asylum seekers, and more. And all of these issues are related to one another. These are some of the topics we'll hear about tonight, because the next mayor is going to have to grapple with all of them. For the past 2 years, the Press Herald has been fortunate to have Rachel Ohm helping our readers navigate these issues. And one of the reasons Rachel has been such a superb City Hall reporter is that she didn't see her jurisdiction confined to the building. She goes out into the community talking to people who are affected by city policy. She distinguished herself with her reporting on asylum seekers and homeless individuals. Rachel recently left the City Hall beat and moved to our State House Bureau. And her replacement, Grace Benninghoff, comes to us from Texas Monthly, NPR, and the nonprofit news outlet VT Digger. We're thankful Grace has joined our newsroom. She's been with us for just a month, but she's already making her mark here. You probably read the terrific profile she wrote last week of these 5 candidates. Those stories stepped away from the public policy and helped our readers see them as people. And this month, we'll publish a series of stories examining where the candidates stand on the issues. Finally, a huge thank you to our subscribers. It's your support that allows us to serve the public with our journalism and events like this. If you're not yet a subscriber, I hope you will consider becoming one and joining us. Now I'll turn things over to Grace and Rachel.
Thank you for the introduction, Steve, and thanks to everyone for being here tonight. The debate is going to be an hour and a half long. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to questions and 30 seconds for rebuttals. There will be 1 minute for closing statements at the end.
We'll be rotating through who answers first, and these questions are written mostly by Rachel and I, but also we have included a few reader questions tonight.
We'll start with the opening statements. Each candidate has 30 seconds. We drew names randomly to decide who will go first, and we'll be starting with Andrew Zarro and then working our way this way with Justin going second. You can go ahead.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Andrew Zarro, and I'm running to be the next mayor of Portland, Maine. I'm running for mayor because our city is facing massive challenges, from housing affordability to homelessness to climate change and infrastructure. And I'm running for mayor because I believe we need a leader with the vision, passion, energy, and experience to tackle those issues head on. I've shown you I can do that in the private and public sector, and I look forward to doing that as your mayor. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and to the Press Herald and UNE for hosting us. My name is Justin Costa, and I'm running to be the next mayor of Portland because I believe that Portland needs a change. We are facing some monumental issues, and I believe that we are struggling to make real progress on those issues in terms of actual policy and results. I've served on the city council, I've served on the school board, I got things done in both of those roles, and I will get things done as your mayor.
Good evening, friends and neighbors. My name is Pious Ali. 20-something years ago, I came to America. Not long after that, September 11 happened. Knowing that if I go back to Ghana, I may not be coming back to America, I decided to stay. Portland welcomed me. I got myself a job in the waterfront in a restaurant called Giovanni's as a dishwasher. I was a young man or a kid from Ghana with dreadlocks. 20 years later, here I am, sitting in front of you with the possibilities of being the next mayor of the greatest city in New England. But
We're going to have to go ahead and wrap this one up pretty quickly.
okay, so I'm done?
We've
You've
exceeded
hit
30 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you, Pius. We're going to move on to Mark.
I began this journey by reaching out and talking to people all across the city to understand what was important to them. Their ideas, experiences, and expectations can be summed up in 2 questions. Are we safer today than we once were? Can we keep this city affordable for everyone? Good people who are afraid of what has become of our parks, our public trails, our public spaces. People who want to change in how we manage that safety. Friends and neighbors who know Portland becomes more expensive every day. They wonder if they can really afford to stay here much longer.
Mark, we're going to have to wrap this one up as well, please.
I enforce rules, so I'll follow them.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'm Dylan Pugh. It's really great to be with you guys today. I'm going to ask a really important question tonight. Do we think that our political and economic systems are serving us? Do we think that they're equipped to handle the enormous challenges that we're facing? Do we think that they honor the people that are working on these challenges? And can we envision a different approach? One that builds people up instead of tearing them down? One in which safety and economic prosperity are not rare, but universal? This is the question I'm holding tonight, and I'm really excited to talk with you about it.
Okay, thank you everyone for your opening statements. We are going to go ahead and jump in with a question that I think is top of mind for a lot of people in Portland. There has been a lot of concern about growing homeless encampments in Portland, and the city has dealt with this in part by sweeping those encampments. As mayor, would you continue sweeps? And if not, what would you do? We're going to go ahead and start with Justin.
Thank you, Grace. Yes, obviously this is the number one issue on the minds of most folks right now. The fundamental challenge that the city has is that we have to acknowledge and act on the fact that what we are doing right now is not working. It's not working for people who are in the homeless encampments, and it's not working for people who are neighbors of the homeless encampments, whether it's residential neighbors, business neighbors, or anyone else. If this issue is not resolved or not on the way to being resolved by the time that the next mayor takes office in December, I think it is paramount that we clearly communicate to the homeless and to the public that we are going to begin the process of winding down these encampments. They are not safe for the individuals that we claim to care so much about. And we need to work very diligently with all of our partners to make sure that we are providing the type of outreach and ultimately placing people in services to the maximum extent possible. And then over the long term, we obviously have great challenges that need to be addressed with substance abuse, mental health, and it's my intention to work with our community partners, with the state, and with our hospital systems to address those issues over the long term.
Thank you. We'll go to Pious.
Can you please repeat the question?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, there has been a lot of concern about growing homeless encampments in Portland, and thus far the city has in part dealt with this by sweeping those encampments. So I'm wondering if as mayor you would continue these sweeps, and if you wouldn't, what would you do instead?
Thank you. Portland is facing a crisis of individuals who are our neighbors who are unhoused. I have lived in a neighborhood that have carried that burden for more than 10 years. And the city is currently working with our partners to do everything that my colleague on my right, Justin Costa, is saying that he's going to do. Yesterday, we voted to move 50 people from the encampment and put them into the homeless service center that we had on Riverside Street. We are also working to find locations where we can put the rest of them. But let's not make no mistake. The homeless crisis that we have in Portland is not going to be solved without working with our partners here in Portland, which are service providers, the state, and our federal partners. Homelessness is a crisis all over the country, and Portland is not an exception. I believe that city staff brought something, and they're going to bring more work that we will look into and move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Pious. We're going to move to Mark.
Sweeps will occur. But up to this point, our strategy is largely focused on providing public health responses for those who need and require them inside the camps. I've pressed strenuously and assertively to bring a public safety component to that equation. The reality is we worry about those in the encampments, but I share an equal worry for those who abut the camps and their experience interacting with that space and the people who live there. There are individuals in the camps that exploit, assault, threaten, and keep addicted their neighbors inside these micro-communities, as the latest term calls them. It's a tough decision, it's a hard decision, but I think as mayor, we have to make the encampments less sticky. We have to encourage them to make the right decision. We can't just hope they'll make the right decision, we have to encourage it. And so therefore, my final observation of honesty, crisis anticipates a timeline where we'll meet a goal and the problem is over. I would rather say we have a homeless condition in this city, and it'll require consistent application of resources and efforts. But the very least I can do as a mayor is ensure that the people in the camps and those who live engaged with the camps are safe from violence, theft, and major disorder conduct that shouldn't be tolerated. I can't have those that are mental health challenged and in a moment of crisis wander naked in the streets. We have to get them to the hospitals. We have to provide the proper intervention.
Okay, we're gonna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Dylan, moving on to you.
Thank you. I would absolutely not sweep homeless encampments when I was mayor. My feeling is that sweeping encampments is inhumane, it's inefficient, and it resets the clock on the person-to-person community building that is the #1 thing that people need to transition out of homelessness and into transitional housing and then permanent housing. Make no mistake, obviously the conditions in the encampment are unbelievable. We shouldn't be in a society where we have encampments, but that's the reality that we have to face right now. And my feeling is that bringing people in to clear the physical space does nothing to address the root cause, and it doesn't help anybody who's on the ground or anybody who's in the city, because people, of course, are not going to go away. They're just going to move to another place. So the thing that we need to do is we need to bring in the resources to stabilize the encampments. And this does include a public safety element, absolutely, but it also includes sanitation and extensive amounts of community outreach. People don't choose to be homeless because of one thing. It is a system of systematic failures that they've experienced throughout their life. And the underlying thing in all of that is broken trust. They've been betrayed by their economic systems. They've been betrayed by public services. We have failed them as a society. And when we come in and clear them, we're reinforcing that lack of trust. And that's the first thing that people need to get in order to move back into society, is to trust society. We should demonstrate that in all of our interactions and all of our approaches to this enormous issue.
All right, Andrew.
Thank you. Listen, we have 3 crises coexisting at the same time. We have a homelessness crisis, a mental health crisis, and a substance abuse crisis. And I'm always really intentional about addressing them, as if it's not a monolith. We also need to be realistic that we have to hold a couple of things at the same time. This is the result of decades of inaction. In the last couple of months, we saw more tents than we've ever seen in this city, and a lot of that is tied to the fact that emergency rental assistance expired in April. And next month, all of a sudden, we had a couple of 100 tents in our city. And that's much bigger than what the city of Portland can do. What we can do is prioritize housing first policies, and we can prioritize permanent housing, because folks are not going to stay in housing if we continue to let them exist in this condition. I agree. Right now is untenable. People are not safe, and we're seeing that increase at alarming rates. So we do need to do something about that. Until we find an alternative to get people into housing with wraparound services, we have to address the encampments as is. And I think the best step forward is to provide infrastructure to make sure that there is regulation there. We can't have people openly using substances, or if they need mental health services, they can't exist like that. That's a failure of our society. But my goal is housing, because if we do that, then encampments won't be an issue for our city. So housing first policies, 100%. Thank you.
It looks like we have a rebuttal from Justin Costa, so that's going to be 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. So I just want to respond to say that this, as much as any issue, illustrates the dynamic that I see happening. We agree on the words. There's no disagreement about some of the issues that we're facing, about the need to address root causes, but we need to translate that into real action. The council last night voted down the only proposal that has been concrete and drafted to deal with the immediate issue that people are dealing with. That is something that has to stop. We have to be able to deal with the immediate and with the long-term simultaneously, and we're not doing that right now.
We're going to go ahead to Andrew Zarro, who has 30 seconds for his rebuttal.
Thank you. Is this still on? Nope. Can you hear me? So last night the council did vote on an item. Oh, there it's back. The council has been doing a lot in the last few months, and we're dealing with, again, decades of inaction that we're trying our absolute best, those of us who are currently sitting councilors. A couple months ago, we added an additional 180 beds in the same district of the homeless services shelter that opened this last March, 208 beds. It was at capacity day one. I understand that this is a massive issue, but to say that the sitting council is not doing something is wildly inaccurate, because in a really short period of time, we've put quite a few beds on the market for people.
Next, we're going to go to Pious Ali.
I just want to add to what Councillor Justin Costa said. I think of the three councillors who are sitting here, I was the only one that last night looked at the crisis that we have through a humane lens, through compassion. I was the only one who voted to move 50 people to the Homeless Service Center. Unfortunately, my colleagues did not see it that way. And I think if we are to get out of this crisis, we need to be creative. We're never going to have a perfect time. Now, we have to make use of what we have. And that is what we had. Unfortunately, my two colleagues who are here did not agree, and they voted it down.
Okay, we're going to go ahead to Mark Dion now, who will also have 30 seconds to respond.
It's so easy to criticize. Really is. Last night I voted against expanding the shelter on Riverside Street because I and some others on the council had given our word to those neighbors that once we built that facility, we would ask no more of that neighborhood by expanding it. There are legitimate arguments that the compression of additional clients in that space would be counterproductive from a clinical point of view. There are no perfect problems, and I guarantee you there are no perfect solutions. I wanted to keep faith with that neighborhood that when we say something, we mean it and we'll stand by it. Yes, it's going to be more work for the city.
We're going to have to wrap this
to try
up.
to find an alternative, but we will.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to move on to our next question.
All right, which is on a related topic. The City Council has been discussing lately the problem of people turning down shelter beds. Do you think the current city shelter is working? If not, what things would you change? And we will start with Pious.
I think part of what I think the current shelter system is working. Part of the challenges that we are having, and we've discussed that very deeply during council meeting last night. Part of what is needed is to find more outreach workers who will explain to those who are at the encampment on this is what is available to you. I will tell you a story of one of the people who live in the encampment. A few days ago, this individual was offered a bed, and the individual had a job. I think it was not explained to the person that there will be an exception for them if they get out of work at 9 p.m. So that individual turned down the bed that was given to them. And so I believe that, and we did discuss that last night, we will get more outreach workers who have the necessary skills needed to engage these individuals and tell them that these are the best that we have for you, and definitely they're going to take it. That is why last night I voted to move 50 of the people from the encampment and bring them to the Homeless Service Center. Unfortunately, it didn't pass. Thank you.
Thanks, Pious. We'll go to Mark.
You have to understand the patient population or client population, whatever term you want to apply. There are high-functioning homeless, usually by circumstance of economics, or they're at a place where they've accepted the challenge of their sobriety and are trying to deal with it. Then there are low-functioning clients or patients, depending what kind of jacket you wear, and they're captured by the toxicity of their relationship with substances, or they're not in a place from a cognitive point of view to appreciate the adverse consequence of untreated mental health. Those are individuals that are very difficult to solicit into a shelter environment because they perceive that as a threat environment. So we've got to do work there, and I don't think we've been as sophisticated as I would hope in teasing out the differences in our client population, and I might be reaching out to this very institution for assistance on how we could approach those who anxiety is a big deal. I don't make diagnoses, I don't have the ability, but I do know when somebody's in crisis, it looks like anxiety to me, and we have to find a way to minimize that so that we can solicit them into shelter, because I believe everyone's entitled to shelter first. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dylan.
Thank you. What I hear overwhelmingly from people who work on the ground with unhoused people and from people that are actually in the shelter is that our current system isn't working. Very often they don't feel safe in the shelter. They've been assaulted, they've had their possessions stolen, or they're not allowed to sleep next to their significant other or bring their pet with them. I think there's a lot of small changes we can do to get back to that question of trust and how do we establish trust with this population. And if we go out to somebody who is on the street, and obviously the goal is to get everyone off the street, but we offer them something that feels less safe than the street, we have to take that seriously because something has clearly happened in their life to make that the case. So I think there's two ways of thinking about it. The first is that let's make small changes to make the shelter environments much more sustainably safe for people so that they can have that sort of sense of security that they need, because you don't want a situation where sleeping in a tent feels safer than a shelter. And the second thing is that we know from research that the large shelter model is not the most effective way of dealing with homelessness at a large scale. So I think that we should divert any further funding for large emergency shelters into smaller shelters and housing first initiatives. Because when you have a housing first initiative, you get around all of the issues of safety that people are experiencing in the shelters. You have a door you can lock, you have a shower you can use, you have the autonomy and the stability to restart your life. And that's what we need to focus on at a larger scale, not building more big shelters.
Thanks. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. You know, I kind of take issue with the argument that one size fits all for an emergency shelter, that it should, because it exists, it's for everyone, and too bad if it's not. The problem is the shelter opened in March at capacity day one. It hasn't had the chance to work the way it's supposed to, right? So there are barriers. We've identified some of them here this evening. So that means if we know people aren't taking advantage of the shelter for mental health issues or substance abuse issues, that tells me that they need to be in programs where they actually are going to get the services that they need to go to a detox center, and then when the time is right, go either to an emergency shelter because they can access it or transitional housing. You know, I have a hard time with us saying that it's a capacity issue because we have capacity right now. So adding more capacity to a shelter of 208 beds ain't going to cut it, in my opinion. That's not going to get to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is that there are systemic issues that are breaking people in our society, and that's hard. It's a hard truth. Portland, Maine's not going to solve that on its own. At best, we'll mitigate it, and we'll do a good job in doing so. I have a proposal for transitional housing. Yes, I know it's an ambitious goal, but there's a way to pay for it, and that there's data that shows us that emergency housing on its own is not going to meet the moment. Right? We need to give people an opportunity with wraparound services, housing first policies, and the goal needs to be permanent housing. Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I certainly agree in the long term with very much with most of what Andrew just said, but I think, again, that skirts the immediate concern. That doesn't address any concern from a resident who is dealing with used hypodermic needles. It doesn't deal with the businesses who are having to clean up human feces on a regular basis or deal with people overdosing in their facilities or anything like that. And that's, again, why we have to do this in parallel. The current system has some imperfections. There are some policy things that need to happen related to the ability of couples to stay together and those sorts of things. I think there's broad agreement on that. And what the Health and Human Services Department is trying to do in partnership with many nonprofits throughout the community is conceptually sound, but we have to be clear and honest that they are in a very difficult spot because we know that building relationships with individuals who are experiencing homelessness, especially if there are mental health and substance abuse issues, takes time. And the one thing that we didn't do a good job of this year, above all else, is getting in front of this problem when it initially started back in the spring in the Bayside Trail. That has limited the time that all of the service providers have had to build those relationships, and we shouldn't be surprised that that makes it harder for them to get people placed in services. And lastly, I will say that we can't lose sight of the fact that this is, again, why it is important that we signal that we are going to wind down the encampments, because the faulty assumption here is that this is a closed group of individuals.
Justin, I need you to wrap it up.
The reality is we've known for a long time that the vast majority of individuals in our system are not actually Portland residents. So we need to stop more people from coming in when we're already over capacity.
All right, and I think Andrew Zarro wants to respond, so go ahead, Andrew, you have 30 seconds.
I just want to say that this did not start in the spring. This started a long time ago. This is quite a bit of momentum that's leading to something that I think we all agree on is untenable, and we need to do something about it. I also think that, you know, to say that, to pit the business community against our unhoused community is just alarming to me. I was a small business owner. I would open my shop at 5:30 every morning. And sometimes there would be someone passed out on my steps, and I would do my best to get them to services that they need, like Milestone, like Preble Street. I don't like the idea that it's one or the other. We're a community of people who are neighbors, housed or not.
That's 30 seconds. And Mark, you can have 30 seconds as well.
Listen, I just want to say something about this division between the notion of the shelter community, the unhoused, and the business community. I think what the business community has been concerned about, anxious about, is that the fact that the entire conversation about the unhoused is focused on clients, their needs, how we meet those expectations and our strategies. And there's been little or no effort or conversation about the consequences of being a budding neighbor. It's really great to talk about encampments as an abstract, down the road, out of sight, out of mind.
We're at 30 seconds.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next question, which is, again, about this issue. We wanted to really dedicate some time to this because we know it's an issue the city is really grappling with. So we want to talk about some of the underlying causes of homelessness. Drug use and mental illness are often raised as concerns associated with encampments, and these issues also pose barriers to getting people off the street and into shelter. What is your plan for addressing these root causes of homelessness? And we're going to go ahead and start with Mark.
That requires a lot of thought. I mean, there's no snap answer to this. In terms of substance use disorder, it's a long haul investment. My own nephew suffers from that disorder, and he had a heart valve replaced yesterday. That's the consequence of his decisions, and he's been in more rehab than possible. I guess here's a simple question that I would ask city staff if I was mayor. We distribute thousands of needles a month, thousands of needles, but we don't circle back, close the loop, and try to get actively involved in getting people into treatment. There's been talk of safe injection sites on the theory that, oh, they'll come to you and they'll be safe. I don't know. That can be a conversation. But I do know they need some type of a protected place so that we can actively intervene. Those individuals do not get up in the morning and say, I'm seeking treatment. They're trying to survive on a hamster ring that demands that they find more drugs today. They're not willing or able to do that right now. And I think we need to interrupt that. I've talked a lot about public safety, but I'm equally passionate about strategies around public health so we can actively engage. But you can't actively engage them in potential treatment modalities if they're inside someone's LL Bean tent trying to huddle against the wind as it'll begin to start to blow now. That's not the proper venue to do that.
We're going to have to wrap this one up and move on to Dylan.
Thank you. I think to address this properly, we have to go one level deeper and say, what is the source of addiction? What is the source of substance use disease? Because this isn't something that always springs into someone's life, uninvited. We have to address the root cause, which is structural economic inequality. And we have to talk about a culture of bias. We have to talk about a culture of stigma and a culture of a lack of economic opportunities. And I absolutely think that if you go out to somebody who is just trying to survive, as you say, Mark, and you're right, somebody is in a tent using drugs, that is absolutely not the right venue, which is why we need housing first. Because we can't expect someone who is going through one of the most traumatic experiences imaginable, homelessness, who is also in the throes of a very serious drug addiction, to have any resources to get better. And what we need to stop doing is we need to stop putting barriers in front of people to access that. We need to stop saying, oh, well, you can come and live here when you demonstrate that you are sober or when you demonstrate this commitment to this treatment protocol, because that's reversing the order of it. We need to say, you have the right to live. You have the right to housing. You have the right to stability. Here it is. And then everyone is going to come out of that in a much better position and be able to go into treatment, to be able to get well. This is something that's really close to me. Many of my close friends are in recovery. And I can tell you, it is one of the most difficult things that a person can go through. And so we need to approach it with that mindset of how do we support people who are going through just something incredibly hard.
Okay, we're going to move on to Andrew.
Thank you. Substance abuse is, it's so much bigger than all of us. All of you have seen someone or have known someone who is struggling with substance abuse in some capacity. I mean, it's an epidemic in our country. And to see it playing out in our city is not surprising. And it's heartbreaking. I think right now, because we are in a constant state of emergency, always reacting, it's hard for us to move the needle sometimes on such complicated, nuanced, intimate issues. But what I think we can do is look to where it's been successful elsewhere. We have partners in the city like Milestone who are prioritizing programs to help people work through substance abuse and detox so that they can actually have a shot at workforce training and housing. And I agree entirely, I've said it already, housing first policies are one amazing way to tackle this issue head on, but only if the city does more to offer the ability for people to work through their addiction. This one, it's near and dear to my heart too. It truly, I know Portland well, and I know everyone wants the best for their neighbor. But this is where I think the city actually can work closer with our partners, closer with the state. There's a good amount of funding available for us to do this, but this is where we need to come together. We need to staff programming for this and work closely with our partners and call them to the table. They are experts in this field as well, and we need them to help us work through this. Thank you.
Okay, Justin.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of agreement around the dais on this issue. You know, these are deep and complex issues that are much bigger than the city, and this is another example of the city of Portland really being the center in terms of being a service provider. We're providing a de facto regional service. We know that this is a bigger issue than just the city of Portland, and it's not going to be something that a mayor or a council or a city government is ever going to solve for us. But what we can do is make progress. We can do that, as has been noted, by working and continuing to work with all of our nonprofit providers who are more directly involved in service provision and addiction recovery. We have some fantastic nonprofits throughout the city of Portland that do tremendous work for an incredible number of people. And so the city needs to continue to explore ways that we can support them, whether it's partnerships to provide facilities or CDBG funding or any number of other items. The element that I would note, would be remiss if I didn't note, that I think is missing from some of this is the role of our major hospital systems in this. I have to believe that there is a desire on the part of our major hospitals to do more to treat addiction. It is not in their interest to have people presenting with overdose symptoms or anything like that in their emergency rooms and affecting the way that they provide services to a broad clientele. I have to believe that there are ways that we can build out partnerships with all of them.
Thank you so much. On to Pious.
Thank you. I used to work with an organization called Volunteers of America, North in New England, and that's exactly what they do. I have worked with many individuals through that program who have a long history of addiction, and I have seen it work. Making a mistake, or there are several reasons why people find themselves in addiction. Sometimes it's by choice, but sometimes it is accidental. It doesn't matter how you get to have addiction, it shouldn't be a life sentence. Through the program that I'm talking about, we provide wrap-around services where every other month, your team will meet with you and give you feedback and help you walk back into society. I have seen people that have gone through that program and got back to be productive members of our community. I walk into some of them right here in Portland, and I'm sure that I'm sure that with the right person who know how to bring people together to tackle difficult issues, we can solve this as a city. And I think I know how to do that because I've done that in the past. We can work with the service providers who are in our city who know how to do this. And I just mentioned one. All we have to do is bring them to the table and have a conversation and ask them to invite others so that we will apply the model that they use in their program on Brackett Street. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Back in April, there was a neo-Nazi march in the center of town that left a lot of people feeling scared and vulnerable. We've also seen hate speech proliferate at recent city council meetings. What can the city do to make sure all its residents feel safe and welcome while not stepping on anyone's First Amendment rights? And we'll start with Dylan.
Thank you. Yeah, this is obviously a huge issue, and I feel a little bad giving more airtime to people that would, poison the well of our democracy, so to speak. But this is obviously an issue that we're dealing with. It's an issue that is not going to go away. And we should be really clear that it's not just protests. It's not just people showing up to city council meetings trying to troll. This is a really serious issue with people that mean to inflict violence on people in our community and people that are trying to set up a permanent home here up in northern Maine so that they can live in what they want to call a white ethno-state, which is obviously something that is beyond comprehension. We have to oppose it totally. And I think that the first thing we have to do is let's re-examine the Zoom protocols. Let's maybe go to a written only or something like that. But that's really not the biggest part of this because that's just a symptom. The issue is how do we lose people to this ideology in the first place? In the same situation, I've said this before, I don't think that anyone is born with hate in their heart. No one wakes up and wants to go down the path of hate, but we lose them somewhere along the line. And we need to create a society and an economic situation primarily in which no one falls prey to this ideology. And what we've seen in the past is that you have to have an absolutely ironclad rejection of this. You can't allow it any legitimacy. So let's stabilize the situation by making everyone feel safe first, and then let's get ahead of this so that we don't have to deal with an even worse situation down the line.
Thank you. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. So let me be clear that this is a continued attempt to undermine your democracy. Those of us on the council have dealt with this in chambers. We've addressed it recently by having our public comment be in person only, just like pre-pandemic, but that's not going to solve the problem. We need to be unified as a community, as a city, that we are committed to a multiracial democracy, that we are committed to upholding your rights as constituents of this city, and that we will not in any way, shape, or form allow some radicalized, racist, Nazi group to undermine what is yours. I have to remind myself, and I'll remind you as well, that there are more of us than them, and that their attempt to undermine what we do, your business, city business, that stops. That's not happening. And I think this is one of the times all of us up here are going to agree completely that we are fully committed, no matter who becomes the next mayor of Portland, to make sure that your rights are protected, that our most vulnerable members of our community are protected, that their voices are uplifted, and that we will not tolerate this anti-Semitism, racism, misogyny, homophobia, you name it. That is not allowed in the city of Portland, and that does not impede on anyone's free speech. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dylan. Or Justin, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I echo everything that's been said. This is abhorrent. It poisons the well of our democracy, and I know that it's something that we all feel strongly about and agree on. One of the most important characteristics of Portland as a community is its welcoming and inclusive nature. And The only thing that I really want to say about this, because we're all in agreement here, is that I think this is one of those issues that it is so important to just emphasize that this is beyond politics. Every one of us agrees here. Every one of us is going to pursue the same types of things. We want to see an open, welcoming, inclusive community that protects everyone in it and makes all of the people that call Portland their home feel as safe as as we can possibly make it. And I really want to emphasize that, and I hope that no one walks away, at least from this question, parsing the particular phrase that I use or the way that Pious leans while he says it or anything. There is no daylight between any of us on this issue, and we should be proud of that as a community, actually.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Justin, you are right. This issue is an issue that nobody should politicize it. To some of us, it's our everyday life. A few years ago, I was walking on Congress Street with my dreadlocks, and a group of white boys were sitting in a pickup truck, and when they drove past, they said the N-word, "Go back where you come from." Since then, I dedicated my work, those of you who have followed my career, into fighting any type of racism or any type of misogynist in our city. I have worked to build communities around this conversation. I have founded an organization called Men Interfaith Youth Alliance, where I bring young people from different backgrounds to have this conversation. I currently serve on the Holocaust and Human Rights Centers Board, and I've worked with Seeds of Peace, for those of you who know that organization and what they tackle. That is what brought me to the seat that I'm sitting right now, that type of work. As your mayor, I would tackle it heads on. How do I tackle that? The work that I have done over the years have prepared me to lead on this conversation. During the pandemic, when the racial justice marches was happening all over the country, I worked with my colleagues on the council to create the Racial Equity Steering Committee, which I co-chaired. And we made a series of recommendations to the full council, including creating the Office of JDI, Justice, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I will make sure as the mayor that everything that is in that recommendation is implemented by the City of Portland. Thank you.
Thank you, Pious. And Mark, you can go ahead.
This issue is important to me. If anyone was a student of history, in the late 80s, early 90s, I received an award from then U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales and the International Chiefs of Police as one of the top 10 officers in the country. Why was that? I'm not that special. What was different about me is myself and now a deputy commissioner in the Boston Police, Bill Johnson. We hunted down the skinheads. We chased the Klan. We found bigots and held them accountable in a court of law. I'm all for this diversity. I've worked hard in that area. But I want to send a message that this city will not accept that conduct, and we will go to any lengths possible to bring them before a judge. What we've been subjected to, what my colleagues on this council have been subjected to, I would be happy to present to a judge. Let a judge tell me it's not a hate crime. I doubt they will. And let us call them for who they are, as bigots, all right? That history evaporated with time because things stabilized, but like history, it repeats itself. As mayor, I'll expect the city manager, acting through the police chief, to have an aggressive, assertive program that will investigate these cases, bring them to the Attorney General, and have them prosecute them either for civil injunctions or for the crimes they commit, and in the process be clear to call them who they are for a change, and not simply sit back and figure out a way to tolerate their despicable conduct against ourselves and our communities. These are acts of community terrorism. Thank you very much.
We're going to go ahead and move on to our next question. The Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of the world's oceans. Climate change is right here on our doorstep, and it is impacting Maine's ecosystems in a myriad of other ways. If you could address one thing related to climate change, what would your proposal be? And I want to be clear here, we want specific policy ideas from all of you. We're going to start with Andrew.
Thank you, Grace. So I want to take a moment and acknowledge this is our 5th debate, and this is the first time someone has brought up climate change. And I just want to say thank you for doing that. Honestly, okay, I'm losing time here. So for those of you who know me, you know that I've been waiting for this question. For those of you who don't, climate work is at the core of my work on the City Council. It's extremely important to me, and it's a core part of my platform. So you want a specific example. Well, luckily I have one. I've been working for about a year now since, if you remember, the referenda last year on cruise ships, if anyone remembers that. So that didn't happen, but what did happen was I've been working closely with CMP. I called CMP and Avangrid to the table. They presented to my committee, Sustainability and Transportation, and they said, okay, what do you need, guys? And we said that we need to upgrade our electrical grid. We have an Electrify Everything program that our goal is to electrify the entire city and transition to clean renewable energy through beneficial electrification. So they said, be granular with your request, and we did. They also said no city in the state of Maine has ever called them for a presentation of its kind. Fast forward, we're about to receive a report out to our committee. I've been working with Senator King's office, and we have a very real opportunity that we are going to take federal funds and invest in upgrading Portland's electrical grid to make it 3 times larger than it is, not only to accommodate shore power, but to change the quality of life for every Portlander. I'm extremely proud of this work, and I have every goal of seeing it through as your next mayor.
Thank you. Justin.
Thank you, and Andrew, thank you for your work on the council on this issue. So I think climate change is obviously a big issue. I want to touch on some of the things that I think the next mayor should really be focused on. One is anything we can do to expand access to solar. One of the things Councilor Ali and I think we're both there when we opened the Ocean Avenue Solar Farm. That is a major accomplishment for a municipal government to be able to set up and begin to operate a solar farm of that size, and we're very proud of that. We need to continue to look at ways that we can expand our solar production in the city, both at the private level and on public facilities, anytime that we have an opportunity to do that. We need to redouble efforts to expand what everyone else is trying to expand, access to EV charging stations. There are a number of ways that we can do that, working in partnership with other governmental entities and also with private companies that are in that business. I think that there's some real exciting ways that we could do that. I don't want to get too into the technical weeds, but even expanding them into neighborhoods, because what most people don't realize is the city of Portland now owns the telephone poles that provide a ready opportunity to do that in appropriate areas. And I see that I'm out of time, so I will try and respect that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. On to Pious.
Thank you. I already did something. Do I still have to? That is a joke. In addition to what we've done in what is the solar farms, I will create a municipal-owned consumer-owned utility. Those of you who know, there is one that is being done in Kennebunk. It is owned by the city of Kennebunk. I will explore the possibilities of doing that. It reduces the carbon emission that goes into the air from our city. And we already have a plan in place in terms of how to build people, because we have the Portland Water District. It is something that I will explore as mayor because we have the infrastructure. I will also look into strengthening the Green New Deal, which was passed by the citizens of Portland a few years ago. I will look into how to work to improve it. I will look at requiring benchmarking from commercial real estate owners in Portland. And finally, I will enact a carbon impact fee. And if you want details on how I will do that, because I only have a few seconds left, it's all on my website. So thank you.
Thank you, Pious. On to Mark.
I'm the most simple person here. Those are great ideas. I served 6 years on the Energy Committee in the legislature as chair. They're pretty complicated ideas, but I'll promise very little, but try to deliver. I want to plant trees everywhere and anywhere we can. We used to be called the forest city. Why can't we do it again? That's going to change the carbon footprint by filtering our air. Second, what I worry about is probably pretty pedestrian, but I'm concerned that Commercial Street gets flooded almost routinely now. I would like to look at a strategy to protect the harbor, but to protect the interests that exist on Commercial Street. And the last thing on my list, because we all see it every day, is Back Cove. I've been here since I was 17, I'm 68. That cove looks a whole lot different than it did when I first arrived in the city. I want to do what I can to protect that. It is the internal jewel, and it shouldn't go away. So if I can get those small things done, then when I come to you with a really big idea, maybe you'll trust that I can actually get it done. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. On to Dylan.
Thank you. I'm also really glad that this topic has come up because it is absolutely critical. And I don't know if a lot of people know that the Gulf of Maine is warming 95% faster than the rest of the ocean. We are ground zero for this, and we have to be really prepared. For those of you who don't know, I work at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. I work with climate data every single day, and it's honestly kind of scary, the stuff that is coming through. So we have to acknowledge the fact that climate change is already here. We are already seeing the effects of it, like you were mentioning, Mark, Commercial Street. We're seeing the effects of it already. So since we were asked to give one thing, I think, it's no one thing you can do for the climate. Everybody has great ideas up here. But the most critical need, by my assessment, is that we look at what's already happening. We have to think past prevention and onto mitigation because it's here and it's not going to go away. And I think protecting the working waterfront is the number one thing because that is going to change dramatically in a very short period of time. And we need to talk to people that are down there, fishermen, business owners, and we need to expand what we've done in a city so far, which is a great start, but we need to expand into a climate vulnerability assessment to identify critical pieces of infrastructure that are going to be underwater. We're talking about electrical boxes, parts of the Union Wharf, and we need to have a plan that we can execute very quickly to mitigate that, because once the ball starts rolling on this, we're going to have a lot of changes backed up and some very, very dire economic consequences, not just for the working waterfront, but for the whole city. So that's the first thing that I would focus on.
Thank you, and it looks like Andrew wants to respond. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Grace. I just love that we're talking about climate work. A couple of things that came up that are really interesting, though, and I just, hopefully I can make your job easier, Councilor, if you become our next mayor. So we actually already have energy benchmarking for commercial buildings, and Councilor Dion and I worked on tripling the size of the sustainability budget 2 years ago, and we hired a full-time person who actually does commercial energy benchmarking already. And we actually brought a carbon impact fee to our committee last month, so you can expect that hopefully in front of the council in the coming days. Last, with the municipal owned utility, I'm curious, we don't have the infrastructure. Our infrastructure is archaic, so I'm just curious what that infrastructure looks like.
All right, thank you so much, Andrew. And Pious is going to respond. You have 30 seconds.
Right, thank you for the reminder. We all know that the role that we are all exploring and asking you to vote for us to occupy is a role that have limited power. So when I say that I will do this, what I mean is that we will explore it together as a council. In terms of the municipal utility company, as I said when I said it, we have the Portland Water District. That is an infrastructure through which we can explore the possibilities of implementing that. So that is what I mean when I say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pious. I think we are ready to move on to our next question.
All right, and this is going to be our first question from a reader for the evening. It's about rent control. Do you support Portland's rent control ordinance? If yes, explain why, and if not, what would you do to change it? And we'll start with Justin.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is I respect Portland's rent control ordinance. It's been passed by the voters, it's been modified by the voters, and it's the law of the land. I am a renter myself. I probably benefit from it. But my longer-term concern is what are we doing to address the larger issue, which is obviously the affordability of housing, and what are we doing to grow our housing stock, which is the only long-term solution to the issues that we're facing in the housing market, and the only way we're going to turn around the question of affordability for people in this city. What I have seen is that everyone agrees on the issue. No one in this audience is going to be surprised to hear candidates wanting to talk about the affordability of housing. But what we're struggling to do, I think, is to turn that into specific zoning reforms, specific funding reforms, and those are the things that I want to work on. I think there are complex root causes that we continue to talk about at the expense of taking immediate action that can make it easier to build affordable housing. So what I would like to do as mayor is start in the areas that are non-controversial or minimally controversial along Brighton and Forest Aves. We can give density bonuses to nonprofit affordable housing developers tied to affordability restrictions. And then we can begin the process of looking at how we can repurpose some of our housing trust funds to support more immediately impactful
Justin,
things than construction.
That's time. And can I also ask you to clarify with regards to rent control? Would you not change the current ordinance then?
Well, it can't be changed without going back to the voters.
Right,
so
yeah.
that would not be a priority of mine as mayor.
Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Pious.
Thank you. As Justin said, I will respect the decision of the Portland voters. I think it's been voted on twice, so I'll respect that. But rent control is not a solution to our housing crisis. That is why, in my first year as the leader of the city, I will issue a $50 million, housing bond. Why will I do that? Because we need more housing. When I canvass, what I hear from the people who live in this city is that there is no housing. I walk into a gentleman's house and he said to me, "Come in, Pious." He said, "My daughter lives in Portland. My daughter grew up in Portland and she works in Portland, but she cannot afford to live in Portland. She has to live outside Portland." And I felt bad because I have a daughter who is in school outside the state. I want her to come back. And because of that, I will issue a $50 million housing bond and build all sorts of houses, including affordable housing and co-op housing. A co-op housing is the type of housing when somebody goes in, rent into it, they build equity. After a couple of years, when they leave with some money that they can also make a down payment to own their own home. And I will look into our Airbnb regulations and make sure that individuals who have non-owner occupied, there are 400 houses in the non-owner occupied. I will make sure that I bring it back to the market because we need more housing, and that will give us 400 more units on the market.
Thank you. Mark, you can go ahead.
I think sometimes leadership is tough because you got to tell the truth. Or as my Muslim friends would say, even when the taste is bitter. So here's my truth. It's a mess. It is a total mess. I'm not sure it serves the interests of landlords, property owners, if they want that title, or tenants. It has developed a bureaucracy, which should always be a signal. Policy isn't good if it needs its own agency to figure it out. And nothing gets done except cyclical attacks on both constituencies by each other, and we're asked to join in. It reminds me of the Irish proverb, is this a private fight or can anyone join? Right? And you know the Irish answer is, of course. And there's a pint waiting for you when you're done. So I think one of the charter responsibilities of a mayor is to be the great convener, to try to strike the right bargain. So when I look at rent control, I'm not going to be in a position of saying they're right, they're wrong, but can we come to the table? Can we do the work? That won't be an overnight success, but if at least inspires them to put down their legislative weapons of signatures and petitions, then I will have accomplished something as a mayor. And maybe like other peace talks, it'll be adopted by my successor. But at least I hope they say he started them down the right process. They share a community. They have more common interests than they believe.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Dylan, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I do support rent control. I also do think that it is symptomatic of a larger issue. I don't think that you want to have a system in the long term where you have people that are right on the edge of being able to be priced out of their homes. That is a level of economic instability that is not conducive to building community. It's not conducive to building wealth. It's not conducive to the democratic process, because you do get this constant ping-ponging back and forth where a referendum is passed and then another interest group tries to roll it back, and we have, I don't even know, we have 8 questions at this point, and that's deeply indicative of the lack of consensus in our community. And so when I think about this question, I say, yeah, rent control was good, I support it because something had to be done. People are absolutely getting priced out. But how do we get ahead of the issue and get people to a point where they can afford housing comfortably, where they can build some wealth in their housing? And that's why I want to be careful when we talk about building housing supply, that we're not just talking about building a lot of housing, but preserving the exact same power dynamics that we have in our current housing market. Because as much as supply, power dynamics are also to blame for the economic inequality that we're dealing with. So when we talk about housing, I want people to be able to own homes if they wish. And I think Portland has to be a national leader on this. I think we have to get really creative in supporting co-housing, limited equity partnerships, and working with financial institutions, local credit unions, and national nonprofits to create really favorable mortgages for people and support them if they want to change their apartment building into a co-op, for instance. So the goal has to be long-term affordability and stability, not just bringing rents down a little bit.
Thanks, Dylan. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. I'm hoping we'll dive right into housing plans after this one, but listen, since 2019, HUD states that the average 2-bedroom went up about 35%, right? And again, we've talked about it, hopefully we'll talk about it more tonight. We have a significant deficit of housing in our city. A recent report came out saying that there's about 10,000 units short for the state of housing units. 9,000 of those are in Portland area. So of course a referenda showed up a couple years ago. People were upset. They wanted something to happen. And I think rent control is a subset of overall tenant protections, right? And I think we interchange them sometimes on accident. We don't want to do that because it's a bigger picture here. But I'm a data person. Everyone says, Zarro, stop being so wonky. But I really like data because it informs you of what's going on. And we know some stuff about rent control. First, rent control is really good at keeping people who have a lease in their place. But it's not so good at helping people who don't have a place or don't have a lease. And when you have limited housing stock, it gets worse. And so that's the second part. Rent control works when coupled with robust housing stock and development. And that's where the city of Portland has failed. And we've been failing on that for a long time, way before I was on the council. And so that's why a part of my housing plan, which hopefully we'll talk about soon for all of us, that's a priority, right? If we get to the root of the issue, we're going to stop finding all the symptoms that are problematic, as many of my colleagues up here have mentioned. So thank you.
Well, Andrew, I think your wish is coming true. We're going to discuss housing even more. This one is another reader question. How would you increase affordable housing in Portland without destroying the unique character and charm of our neighborhoods, which is what makes our city so special for residents and visitors? And we will start this one off with Pious.
Thank you. As I've said earlier, my housing plan includes $50 million housing bond, which we will build affordable housing. We will also give people the opportunity to own by getting them to rent into a co-op housing where they will build equity. And then you take that equity out to go and make a down payment to pay for their own housing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to Mark.
Can I have the question again?
Absolutely. Again, this is a question from one of our readers. How would you increase affordable housing in Portland without destroying the unique character and charm of our neighborhoods, which is what makes our city so special for residents and visitors?
Charm, that's what threw me. We're in a political debate, we get charm. Listen, I know there's a term called gentle density. I'm not sure what that means, right? It's like a lot, but you don't really notice. I think the most important thing in developing housing might be to address the hard question of density. But in order to get the correct answer, you have to trust the people that live in the neighborhood. This has to be a bottoms-up decision about how you want to structure the human scale of your neighborhood. My wife mandated that I live in the neighborhood I do. People think I have power. I have none, all right? And she did it for the most rational reason. She had a perception of what the schools were like in that neighborhood, and she was determined that we would be there. I like the other neighborhood, and schools seem fine to me, but I'm just a dad. So I think when it comes to recode, that's what this question is about, really, and we look about how we want to structure Portland, it's imperative that we solicit community engagement. This can't be allowed to be something that I come in and say, you know, this is good for you. Trust me. No. I have to trust you, and you will help us determine what the agenda is and the priorities are for the place you live, because you made a very intentional decision to live there. I am not going to disrespect that, and I have to incorporate that in a council decision about how we make investments or create rules that dictate how you will live in that space. I think this is a very...
Thank you, Mark. We are hitting on that. We're getting to time there. So, Dylan, you are up next.
Thank you. I don't view these as incompatible goals at all. I think you can absolutely increase the density of housing, increase the number of units while maintaining the charm and the special nature of each of our neighborhoods. And I think Mark is right that you absolutely have to start with community outreach to understand what people love about their neighborhood, what did they like, and also what would they like to see. I live in North Deering, sort of North Back Cove, as the realtors graciously call it, and over by Allen's Corner. And one thing that I would love to see is that redeveloped into a real community space. So I think that while we want to respect what's there, there's also a real opportunity for growth. And I think the thing to understand here is probably where this question comes from is people that have lived in neighborhoods and seen them change dramatically because some developer has come in and plopped a cookie cutter building with 80 units or whatever without doing the feedback. And I guess the question here is really, how can we have both that, but also preserving the profit margin of a developer or a bank somewhere? And I ask the simple question is, what if we moved past that? What if we had housing that wasn't a commodity, that we didn't worry about the profit margin of someone who doesn't even live in Portland? Because I think when you bring that out of the equation, the conversation opens up. You can say, yeah, let's involve the community. Let's involve in the process. Let's involve local architects so you don't have to go from some big catalog in New York for the next building. And let's really think about the goals of housing and making those goals local to Portland and not the profit margin of somebody who doesn't live here.
Thank you, Dylan. Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you, Grace. So I'm going to quote, my dad always says this, "Truth and roses have thorns." And what do I mean by that? I love the question and the concept of the character of the neighborhood, and that it's going to change. I live in a predominantly single-family home neighborhood in Back Cove, not North Back Cove, but close. The character of the neighborhoods are changing. It's going to happen anyway because we're not building enough housing. So the people who can afford to live in the houses that they grew up in and raised their kids in and maybe had their grandkids in, they can't afford to live there anymore. So the character is going to change if we do nothing. It's kind of ironic because we talk about how do we keep what we love without, while growing. But the good news is there is a lot we can do without changing the character of the neighborhood and making it so that you can age in place or be a young family. We can rezone the city where it makes the most sense. Right now, we have chunks of our city that are zoned for light industrial, moderate industrial. We have over 4 million square feet of vacant land. That means your tax dollars are going to get squeezed more and more. So how do we avoid that? How do we get more revenue from the tax base? We build where we should be building without compromising the character of your neighborhood. And I don't think this is rocket science. Other cities are doing it. So my vision is to prioritize that. We need to reform zoning, planning, permitting. We need to figure out how to get to yes and not always go to no, because we're making it harder for ourselves if we don't start thinking differently and boldly.
Thank you, Andrew. On to Justin.
Thank you, Grace. Yeah, this is probably the biggest issue that's facing the city over the medium to long term. It will change the very fabric of our community. And I want to pick up exactly where Andrew just left off. This is about getting to yes. And one of the major issues that I see time and again on issue after issue is that we are struggling to get to yes. We're struggling to move from this conversation, whether it's in here or in council chambers, to actually pass things that get things done. We've had this sort of discussion at multiple forums, and depending on the way the conversation goes, Andrew talks about plans for 12,000 units, Pious talks about $50 million, Mark has a different view, everyone starts arguing, and it's the same types of issues and conversations we've been debating for far too long. What we need to do is move beyond that by taking the proverbial low-hanging fruit and say, what are the things that we agree on? Do we want affordable housing? Where are areas where we can do that, where it's going to be non-controversial? So my idea is to start with those sorts of things. Start with Brighton Avenue, start with Forest Avenue. You're not going to have massive objections to some sort of density along those places. Give density bonuses to make it easier to build affordable housing to nonprofits. We know that works. And then work on the housing trust. We have to move beyond the talk to action.
Thank you, Justin. It looks like we have Mark, Andrew, and Dylan all wanting to respond. We're going to start with Mark, then go to Andrew and Dylan. Mark, you have 30 seconds.
Listen, I was down at the State Street facility for the elders yesterday. If you look around there where Mercy Hospital is, there's a lot of things going on there, Justin. A lot of buildings going up, a lot of apartments and residences. Last night at the State of the City, the mayor said since 2018 we've approved and built most of over 3,000 units in the city. And I only raise that in defense of my current colleagues and our predecessors that, yes, we did do something. Maybe we weren't show ponies about it. I'll make a note about that in the future. But we did get a lot done. Some of our crisis is put upon us by national decisions in the market.
Mark, we're getting to the end
Thank you very much.
of time. We're going to move on to Andrew. 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. I know we've talked about this. We've had 5 debates. We know what the other person's going to say at this point. But, we've talked about this, and we don't operate in a silo, and I know you know that better than most. The council inherits what the previous did. But I think it's important to own that the previous council, which you were a part of, approved a comprehensive plan in 2017 that said over the next 10 years, all we needed was 2,500 units of housing, and then started a recode process that we're still waiting for. And I've asked for transparency in that process every single year, and every single year the mayor has chosen not to, per her right, but I think it's disingenuous to say that we haven't done anything, because we have, and it's quite a bit of work, but it takes a lot of time and effort to get there.
All right, we're going to move on to Dylan, who wanted to respond, and then Justin after him. So 30 seconds, Dylan.
Thanks, I'll be brief. I just want to respond to the word controversial. Justin, I absolutely agree with you that we have a lot of low-hanging fruit. But I also think we need to be a little controversial when it comes to issues like this, because what that can mean is that we're really out on the forefront, we're really leading the way. And I think we're going to have to be a little controversial if we want to really change the structures that we're dealing with, which I think we have to.
Thank you, Dylan. On to Justin. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. So I just want to respond again by saying I'm not claiming the city has done nothing. I'm claiming that there are still people that are really hurting in the city and they need us to do more, and there are concrete, specific things that we could do in the short term. Those should have been done. As your mayor, I will work on those issues and work to make sure that we're continuing to make progress on all of them. That's all that I am saying.
Thanks very much.
All right, I think we're going to try to get into more questions. So this one is going to be about asylum seekers. An influx of asylum seekers has contributed to full shelters and prompted the city to say it no longer can guarantee shelter to new arrivals. What should the city do to provide asylum seekers with resources and housing? And Mark, we can start with you.
We've come to the end of the runway. We cannot continue to go to the Portland property taxpayer to fund every needed resource for asylees. We can provide them safe harbor as a transition to placement in other communities. And this is where I've been very public that the governor's offered us an office. It's a lot of frosting with no cake. Okay, we need more coordination, more leadership to help relocate people into communities where they have a chance to realize an American dream that's better than a cot at a shelter. What a disappointment. After their journey, that's the payoff. Portland can't do this alone. It is a statewide issue. When I was in the Senate, I talked about the absence of the federal government would lead to a condition that municipalities would inherit the responsibility for rational immigration policy. That is wrong. We are not the proper venue to make those kinds of decisions because we don't have access to the resources that can provide the needed support to these families. One of the things that's been missing, and I'm seeing some of that being demonstrated in the community right now, is when the immigrant problem started, the challenge of it in the 70s, a lot of families stepped forward from their own communities to be transition guides into our community, and that worked. And we didn't see a big demand for government services because the community knew how to take care of themselves. I'm a child of grandparent immigrants, and that's how we entered this country. Thank you.
Dylan, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I think the first thing we need to realize is that we have a responsibility to people that are coming here. If people are fleeing horrible situations and they choose to come to Maine and they're able to come to Maine, that's a great honor for us. But obviously that also comes with an enormous amount of responsibility for us. And the question, I think at the core of this question is this idea of self-sufficiency and autonomy over one's life. Because we get a situation here where people who come, they're not able to work even when they're very skilled, and they would be huge assets to the community. And then we end up in this situation where it feels like we're competing to distribute resources to a large number of people that need them, and we never have enough. And so I think we have to address the core issue, and maybe that's being controversial. Maybe that's saying, how do we let these people work, even if it's not right with the federal government? Because I think you're right, Mark. Sadly, we have inherited an immigration policy at the federal level that doesn't make any sense, and it's not our responsibility, but here it is. And I think we need to say, how do we quickly usher these people into a situation where they can provide for themselves, and not just in Portland, but also regionally, give them the ability to move to a community of their choice. And I think there's a lot of possibility here for the city to use the skills of new Mainers and also those people experiencing homelessness to provide novel opportunities for employment, for instance, building housing or building facilities. So I think we have to get creative here, and I think we need to lead the way and say, you can work when you come here, regardless of what the federal government might say.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us are going to agree if we're going to sit up here and wait for the federal government to move the needle on this one, it's going to take some time. So obviously, this feels so much bigger than Portland, but as the largest city in the state, we disproportionately have to tackle a lot of these issues head on. But I want to look at this as an opportunity. These are new folks who are coming to our community. They want to work. They want to contribute. They want to join our school system. They want a new community, and I want to invite them to be a part of that solution. And while we do have restraints on us from the federal government when it comes to allowing folks to work for 6 to 12, sometimes 18 months, there are cities in the country that are saying, we've had enough, we're going to do something about it. And I think it's time that Portland do the same thing. So I'm proposing the concept of a public-private partnership where the city can work with an organization to W-4 some people. Think of it as, say you come to me and you run a restaurant and you need a couple of bussers and a server. Come to us, we'll work with you, and we'll get someone to staff you for the day. You don't need a social security number, it's a workaround. Yeah, sure, there's the chance that we're skirting the edge of that, but What's happening across the country is states and cities are getting fed up with inaction by our federal government. And none of us up here are going to fix it, or at least I don't think so. And we need to be creative because this is not going away. With climate migration, it's going to be worse. So let's embrace this as an opportunity and swing big.
Thank you. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core of this issue certainly goes beyond the city of Portland. We all know that. I think the next mayor is going to have to work in a much more productive way with the state and with other local and regional partners. I'm very hopeful of our ability to expand the work that's being done through the Greater Portland Council of Governments that's trying to seek additional ways that we can house people coming into the state. The bottom line is Maine is facing tremendous demographic and economic challenges related to our aging workforce, and we have to find a way to turn the influx of people seeking asylum into a serious opportunity for the city. If we don't do that, it is a serious missed opportunity. One of the things that I think we have to prepare for is while our federal immigration system is foolish and cruel and welcomes people into the country but then prohibits them from working, that prohibition does expire. It doesn't last forever, and we need to be prepared to address the needs of people that are coming in here to try to get them placed as soon as possible once they do become eligible. The city established several years ago an Office of Economic Opportunity, which was designed to work on some of these types of issues, broadly speaking. The city recently has really struggled to staff that, and we need to make sure that it does get fully staffed so that we have programs in place. But again, the short-term fundamental issue is going to require greater partnerships with a lot of other people. We can't handle this all on our own.
Thank you, and go ahead, Pious.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we need to start looking at asylum seekers as assets instead of liability. Not just the city of Portland, but the state of Maine need to look at what can we do to take these people who are coming here who are highly skilled to make sure that we position them in a place so that once they get their papers, they are ready to go to work. The city of Portland alone, the city government alone, have a deficit of more than 200, workforce. And there are more than 200 asylum seekers who are working on our streets with skills that may fill those positions, which is why I'm grateful that the governor is launching the Office of New Americans. We are joining as a state, 17 other states across the country, and that is what that office is going to do. Currently, there's a conversation going on between the immigrant community and the governor's office on how is that office going to help to make sure that immigrants who come in here are ready the moment they get their papers. I think Shirley Pingree and Susan Collins are also working on reducing the number of hours or the number of months that these individuals have to wait before they get their work permit. And there's a lot of support among immigrant leaders across the country who are advocating for that to make sure that Congress passes that. And that will be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is our final question, and it is one we received from a reader. If circumstances were such that you had to drop out of the race, who would you put your vote behind and why? We all know that we have ranked choice voting in this city, so I would encourage our candidates to err on the side of specificity. And we're going to start with Dylan.
This is such an aggressive question. It's going to put us on the spot. It is, right? Who's your best friend up here and who do you hate? No. It's funny. Let me be clear. I really do respect the work of everyone up here, and it's been really great to get to know them. I didn't start running because I thought that I was better than everybody. I just wanted to contribute to the process and bring a new perspective. So I'm not going to rank everybody, but I will say that there's the stuff that I agree with everyone. I really appreciate Mark's focus on safety. It's something that I share. I think Andrew has a really, really great idea about housing, about housing, about climate change. I think Justin has a really, really great mind for policy and focus on the mechanics of how you get stuff done. And I think Pious has been a great community leader and brings a really valuable perspective to this. So, I would be really happy to have any of these guys as a mayor. And I hope that's not a cop-out. But it feels like it's not really at the core of what we're doing here to say who I like the most. But if you press me, I will. No, I won't. Never mind.
Thank you very much, Dylan. We are moving on to Andrew.
You were one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Like, honestly, you're trying to get us is what you're doing. Listen, I have an immense amount of respect for these four gentlemen. And, I can go through and maybe I'll do it. So I often look at Councilor Dion over here. We joined the council at the same time, and I've learned so much from you. I often call him my uncle. And just has always been there for me when I needed him. Dylan lives in my district, and we met during the first debate, but I just think you're remarkable, everything I've learned about you. And Portland's lucky that you raised your hand to do this. Justin was my city councilor. I took over his seat, and we never got to work together, but I remember him always coming into my old shop and showing up and being there for me if I needed him, and I was the president of the Back Cove Neighborhood Association. I thought it was such a big deal that the city councilor was there. And Pious, I call him the Bernie of Maine. I remember being really intimidated by Pious when I first met him, but he's a movement guy. Why am I sharing these accolades for everyone? Because I'm not going to rank people right now, but I'm going to say that I have a remarkable amount of respect for all of them, and I've learned something from all of them. And I think regardless of who becomes the next mayor, we as a democracy are lucky to have these folks sitting next to me.
Okay, thank you. On to Justin.
Thank you, Grace. Well, if no one else is going to bite, then I'm certainly not going to be the first. But I will own that for all of you. I think I do want to say seriously, Pious and I have served together on the school board and on the city council. We've known each other for a long time. Mark and Andrew and I have obviously known each other. We never had the opportunity to directly serve, but we're respected by some of the same people that we mutually respect who have worked with all of us, and that always matters a great deal. Dylan, I think, has been a really fresh voice and an addition to the campaign, and I think, we've all enjoyed having you and getting to meet you over the course of all of these forums. I think I will probably wrap up there. I have a tremendous amount of respect. I guess I will just close by saying that. It really is. It's a small group of people that have ever had the privilege of being able to participate in public life. A lot of us are up on the stage right now, and we know what it takes. We know what comes along with that. We know the long hours, the times when it feels like it's not fair. And, we've all been through that, and I think respect each other enough to not directly answer the question. But no.
Okay, on to Pious.
Thank you. I'm not making endorsement tonight. However, I will say that I have a lot of respect for anybody who steps forward to serve, whether it is through elected office or any kind of public service. So I have a lot of respect for each and every one of my colleagues here. However, I'm also going to say that the office of Portland Mayor have limited influence. It's a leadership office. So if if I happen for whatever reason to step down, I will pay close attention to what my colleagues are saying. I think we have about 13 forums and debates. This is the fourth one. For the rest of the debate, I will pay close attention if I'm not participating, and see whose description of what they are going to do or what the office entails will fit what I believe to be the office of the mayor in Portland, which is a convener, a leader, and someone who knows how to work collaboratively. Thank you.
Okay, Mark.
They're already laughing. Listen, it's a tough question. The counselors that sit at this table I've worked with, they're good people. I love them. I find them to be exceptional colleagues. I don't know hell about this guy other than what we've met on the campaign trail, but I think I like him. I do. I got to work on his sweater. So, okay, you want me to leave. So if I was going to do that, who could I trust the most to carry out my vision, but do it in such a way that you would mourn that I left? That's my test. So, Cheryl, my wife, if you're listening, I would make sure you're appointed to take my place.
All right, well, on that note, we'll go to closing statements, and you each have 1 minute, and I believe we are back to Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us this evening. That went really quickly. I want to remind everyone of the crossroads that we're at for our city. We have a couple of choices in front of us. We can embrace progress and unity and innovation, or we could do nothing and risk it all. I think the answer is pretty obvious. As your next mayor, I promise to champion collaboration, innovation, and the well-being of each and every one of you. Now, I know sometimes folks have said that my campaign is a little ambitious. I want to vote for someone who dreams big. I want to vote for someone who cares deeply. My campaign is not a wish list, it's a promise to all of you to meet the moment head on. And if I just made myself clear a moment ago, I'm not running against these four gentlemen. I'm running for the vision that I see for Portland that includes all of you. So I humbly ask that you rank me as your first choice in November. Thank you again.
Thanks, Andrew. Go ahead, Justin.
Thank you again to the Press Herald and UNE for hosting us. I'm running for mayor, again, because I believe that we need a change in City Hall. We are good people. We agree on far more than we disagree. But what we have seen time and again is that City Hall is struggling to get to yes. We are struggling to make tough decisions and bring issues to closure so that we can make real progress. I have tremendous personal respect for everyone on the stage. But there are 3 counselors up here right now. And when we talk about many of these ideas, especially on the big issues that we all agree are priorities, they could have introduced these proposals at any time. And what we need right now is someone that's going to take us the next step, that's going to translate our shared goals, our shared vision into action. That's what I did on the city council, that's what I did on the school board, and that's what I'll do as mayor.
Thank you. Go ahead, Pious.
Thank you. Our city is at a crossroads. We have many challenges. We have housing challenges. We have influx of asylum seekers. We have many issues that we need to tackle. And we need somebody who knows how to lead. We need somebody who knows how to think outside the box. We need somebody who knows how to have difficult conversations courageously and collaboratively. We need somebody who have the experience of having done that. And I think I have done that over and over throughout my career since I came to this country. We know somebody who can have a conversation on racism. We know the list goes on and on and on. And I have lived that life. That is what brought me to the seat that I'm sitting on today. I hope that on November 7th, actually starting tomorrow, you will give me your #1 vote. And I'm looking forward to working with you to move our beautiful city forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Pious. And Mark?
I have the last word.
No, I think Dylan does.
I'm sorry, Dylan. Okay, that cost me, 10 seconds? Look, I want to thank the Portland Press Herald and the University of New England for hosting this debate. I also want to thank my fellow candidates for participating in this really important process. My professional life has been built on the values of respect and trust and the idea that you keep your word. Those are the 3 values at the core of my work as a leader. As a police officer, a sheriff, a legislator, and a city councilor, I've always strived to act in your best interests. Tonight, I ask you to give me the opportunity to serve you as your mayor. I ask for your vote and sincerely appreciate the trust and support that you've extended to me over the course of my public service. I will always appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, and Dylan, you can go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mark. I also want to thank the organizers and the moderators, as well as UNE for hosting, and to my colleagues up here as well. I believe all of us in Portland can stand together and do something that has never been done before. We can create a radically new vision of what a city is and what it can be. We can create a city that stands against the evils of our global financial system, a city in which everyone feels empowered and welcomed and safe. These things are imminently possible, but we must change our approach. We must build new systems that have not as their basis bureaucracy and profit, but human well-being, compassion, and empathy. So if you believe, as I believe, that Portland is full of dedicated, incredible people, and that we must seek a politics that honors them, I'd ask that you put me down first on November 7th so we can walk that road together. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you to the 5 of you for being up here, and thank you to UNE for hosting us, and thanks everyone for coming out tonight.